Hello, my name's Natasha and today was my first day back at work following coronavirus and being off sick for a while. My company have been incredible and there was no pressure put upon me to go back to work until I was ready to go back. I'm still not quite 100%, but I'm in a much better place than I was over the past couple of weeks. And one of the things that has sort of plagued me a little bit during my recovery and everything is anxiety. And I've had some treatment and some help for anxiety in the past, and I thought that I would share that with you. I thought I would share sort of my experience of living with anxiety and how I'm doing now in terms of that. I think it's important that people talk about things like this more. People realise that there's a lot of us that have it, and we may not always show it, that it's not a stigma and that we shouldn't feel embarrassed by having mental health problems. And also I wanted to share that I've been doing really well and share the sort of things that help me cope and deal with the anxiety. I did also have some low mood, as the NHS preferred to call it at the time, which is kind of depression, but they don't like to say depression until a bit further down the line. But I did have some depression and low mood, but I'm not going to touch on that in this video. I'm just going to keep it to an anxiety-based thing, because otherwise I think I'll get a little bit confused and I'll end up just sort of going all about the place. I'm going to keep it anxiety focused and hopefully that'll be helpful for you guys. Hopefully I've realised that I've got my legs crossed and my legs bouncing. I must be sort of anxious about filming this, or feel a little bit weird I think filming this, and so apologies if I look like I'm just sort of constantly rocking. I just seem to have no control over my left leg. But I'm going to start back at the beginning, and or the beginning of when anxiety became a part of my life. And I had been feeling signs of anxiety for a while, but I didn't recognise it at the time. So I was not in a very good place with my work. I was having some troubles at work, and I hadn't noticed that I had this dread that built throughout the weekend. And on a Sunday, especially Sunday evening, I had a knot in my stomach. I had this sort of just a feeling of dread. I also had quite a lot of heartburn and acid reflux, and I just didn't feel well. My heart was racing as I was driving to work, sometimes a little bit sweaty. I just felt anxious, but I didn't notice it at the time. I thought that I had a problem with one particular breakfast product that I was eating, and I thought, well, this keeps giving me heartburn, it's obviously this thing. But actually it didn't stop once I stopped eating that, because it was anxiety, but I just did not recognise it at the time. And then a traumatic event happened in 2016, the very beginning of 2016. I'm not going to go into this specific trauma, but this trauma was the catalyst for me. In terms of my depression, absolutely was exacerbated by the trauma. I think I had some kind of PTSD type signs, symptoms, and anyway, this traumatic event happened and it pushed me to my limit, and I was unable to function as a normal human being in the way that I usually do. Okay, and so I was pushed to my limit, but one of the positive things that came out of this was that I realised that in times of extreme stress, I am not governed by my emotional reactions, and as an individual, my rational and more reasonable part of my brain takes over, and I kind of almost go onto autopilot, and maybe I shut down those emotions in order to be able to survive, and I just got things done. But I wasn't eating and sleeping and drinking, and I wasn't taking good care of myself, and I ended up in quite a difficult place with some dark thoughts that really scared me actually, and I hadn't had those things before. I think maybe that's more of the depression creeping in, but I just wanted to say that I was having obviously the both things concurrently, and I'm going to focus on the anxiety. But one of the things that was positive from this was that I realised that I wasn't behaving like my usual self, or I understood that I needed some help because this wasn't something that I could deal with on my own. In terms of anxiety, I couldn't keep still. I got really restless. I couldn't watch an entire TV episode of anything. Films was far too long. I couldn't binge stuff anymore. If I could watch one episode of something, but I couldn't continue. I had no attention span. I was constantly, like, my leg moving reminded me that I was constantly twitching or moving, or I had to be doing something else at the same time as something else, and it was just quite manic at times. Or I had to be pacing. I needed to be walking or moving. I had really poor sleep. If I did fall asleep, I couldn't stay asleep. I would wake up quite early hours in the morning. Sometimes I would be having sort of an anxiety attack, and I'd take myself off into the bathroom and try and reason with myself. That's if I was fortunate enough to get to sleep. Sometimes I just couldn't even get to sleep. And I tried a number of things, but one of the things that I think was most important was that I realised I couldn't do this myself, and I asked for help. I was in another area. And so I went to an emergency walk-in GP where I was there, and that GP said that they were unable to help sort of long term, but they gave me some sleeping tablets because they believed that that would really help me. The fact that I wasn't sleeping had a bigger impact on everything else, and it meant that I wasn't able to manage and cope. So they gave me some sleeping tablets and advised that I spoke to my own GP going forward. There were no appointments with my GP, as you can imagine, so I actually had a telephone appointment with another GP, and this probably had taken another week or so after that, maybe 2 actually. And the sleeping tablets were helping me sleep, but they obviously clearly weren't helping. So the GP that I spoke to on the telephone told me about a service called iTalk, and it's a self-referral service that's available in Hampshire, the county I live in, and some other bits and pieces, but it was something I'd never heard of before. And I basically said to this GP, I just need some help. I am the sort of person that needs to be doing something. So I said, if you can advise me on a book I can read. I'm a scientist, I'm a rational, analytical person. I think in this way. This is the way I kind of work a lot of the time. I am also very emotional, but it helps me with things like this to know that I'm learning about it, reading about it, and making progress going forward. I just can't just live with it. I have to be doing something. And he told me about iTalk, which I hadn't heard of before. But I wanted to make this video because people might not be aware that this exists, and that I'm aware of some, but I'm hopeful there's something like that also exists in the UK for you in your area and in your county. There is a long waiting list, but there I got good service from them. So it probably took a couple of months, in all honesty, to get an appointment. The appointment came through, I spoke to somebody, they gave me an appointment, and then I was given a kind of a counsellor person to talk to. They sent me on a Dealing with Anxiety course, which was a 6-week course in sort of lecture style, so you didn't have to talk to anyone if you didn't want to, and it just sort of talked through things. One of the positive things that I got from that was some trigger awareness. There were things that it made me pay more attention to my triggers, and to discover what they were. And also this in turn helped me then explain that to my husband, so then he could learn what my triggers were. And actually he started to notice things in me more than I did at times. Sometimes he really got quite tuned in to me and how to pick up on things in me that I hadn't really realised myself. So that was really helpful. He was very supportive. And one of the biggest things that I got from that course was some CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy based questions, that when I'm in that moment where everything's spiralling and my head's whirring and I just can't, and I'm frantic basically, and I'm having a bit of a panic and I can't catch my breath, and my heart's racing and I'm gasping for air and I'm just in that bad place, there is something that I learned on this course that has been helpful to me. There are other things that are available that are helpful to other people. For example, a lot of people find grounding helpful, and grounding is where you say out loud 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And by focusing on that, it helps people to calm down, and it helps them get out of that spiral that they're in that moment of like an anxiety attack. Unfortunately for me, that isn't enough to help me. It's not, yeah, it isn't enough. I appreciate that it might help a lot of other people. There are actually 7 questions, but I have taken on 5 of them as being my sort of my main ones. I've had these written everywhere. I had them in a Post-it note in front of my lab book, just inside the cover. So if I had a moment in the lab, I just opened my lab book and stared at these Post-it notes and asked myself these questions just to sort myself out a little bit. I've got them written in my phone, I've got them in a few places, but I will just quickly tell you them now because they may help you, they may not. So the first question that I always that I always ask myself that helps is, what are the chances? So whatever it is that I'm freaking out about, I need to think of an example. Okay, so for example, let's say that I'm getting really worked up about giving a presentation at work, and I think that I'm going to come across stupid, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to get really difficult questions, and I'm going to forget everything that I wanted to say, and it's just all going to go to shit. The first question that I ask myself is, well, what are the chances that's going to happen? Chances are, if I'm in a state like this, then yeah, it might happen. But you know, chances are it won't, because if I prepared my slides and I've got my prompts on there, I can at least get through things. But I rationalise these things with myself. Question number 2 is, will this be important to me in 5 years' time? Will this one presentation, is it really important for my life? Or is this just my weekly update to my team? Or is it something that's big, but it's not that, you know, it could be something that's massive, but just, is it going to be important to me in 5 years' time? And 9 times out of 10, maybe it's not going to be. And the third question is, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I could probably pass out, I could forget everything, I could make an absolute tit of myself in front of everybody. There's many things, but I would probably get over it, in all honesty. But anyway, so I would think about what's the absolute worst that could happen, and most of the time I'd be like, well, I could probably deal with that though, to be fair. I could faint, I could piss myself, that's pretty embarrassing. Why should I just say that? But you know, a lot of the times I think about the things that could happen, and actually I could probably deal with them, or at least it starts to make me think about them. The fourth thing is, am I right to think that? For example, it would be, well, actually it means more like, where's the evidence? So am I right to think that I'm gonna mess this up? Where's the evidence? When I presented every time before, have I constantly been tongue-tied, forgot everything and made a tit of myself? And no, I haven't. This isn't my particular issue, so it might be different for someone else, but it could be, you know, am I right to think that? Where's the evidence? And it could be that before you couldn't answer a question, but it probably wasn't the end of the world. And the fifth thing is, what would a friend say? Or what would you say to a friend? Like, are you being kind to yourself here? Are you being, so what would a friend say to you? What would you say to a friend that was having this sort of situation? So it makes you think in a sensible, rational, reasonable way. There are 2 more questions. I only do those 5, to be honest. I need to just check what these are because I don't know these off by heart. Oh, is life too short to think like this? And the 7th one is this a helpful way to think? So in the 5 questions, I'd already covered those extra 2. So for me, they're like the big 5, and I don't really use those other 2 because I kind of have already covered them. And also in the moment of a proper anxiety attack or in a moment of anxiety, those 2 weren't helpful to me, but they may be really helpful to you, which is why I've added them here, and I really do hope that they will. One of the things that I also found helpful sometimes was when I was really bad and I couldn't even answer these 5 questions, and I was hyperventilating so much I had to sit on a floor or something because I was just in a bad place. I just used to focus on breathing in and out and I used to just say to myself, you know, some people say it's okay not to be okay, or everything will be okay, but for me, I was focused on the fact that this is the worst that it'll get. It'll only get better from here. Like, this is the worst, this is the rock bottom, it'll just get better. So all I ended up saying to myself was, it will get better, it will get better. And I used to just either say that out loud to myself, or I'd be breathing in and out and I'd be thinking it to myself. That was something that I found comforting, and I would recommend you find something that is comforting to you, whatever it is. It could just be, my dog's amazing, but whatever it is that helps you, you know, there's no right or wrong thing to say or do. After that course, I also did a further course because the counsellor person that I had through the iTalks service said that I needed more help, and actually that was more focused on the depression side of things. Focus a lot more on self-care and doing small tasks and taking back control of my life and doing things in small chunks. But that also in turn did help my anxiety. While it was focused on the depression side, it also, I felt like I was doing something for me, and by helping the depression I was helping the anxiety too. But the main thing, that was another 6-week course, but that was more in a group of about 10 people. We were in 2 separate groups, so actually it was just a group of 5 of us going through these things. They do also offer one-to-one if they think that you need that, if you're at that point. There were some people that obviously had far worse cases than I did, but they have a different pathways for lots of different people. One of the things that helped me, that I hope will really help you, is to talk to friends and family or someone that you trust. There was somebody at my work that I spoke to at the time, but I also spoke a lot to my husband, and he listened and didn't make me feel like I was an idiot. But I really think the biggest things was that I asked for help. It wasn't something that I could deal with on my own. I wasn't embarrassed or ashamed. This is something that we all deal with, and I really hope that if you're not in a good place, that you can ask for help. I will leave the information for iTalk, which is the one in Hampshire that I spoke to. I did have some private counselling that I paid for myself as well. And a lot of things went on the depression route, but in terms of anxiety, it was incredibly helpful. I hope that there is something similar, a similar service in your area. I'd recommend trying to find out about it. My doctors have now started putting it on their website. I guess they're trying to raise awareness because people, you know, clearly aren't aware that it exists. If you are struggling, then know that it will get better and it can get better. But chances are it's not something that you can deal with alone. As I said, I am in a good place. I had a little bit of anxiety over the coronavirus type thing, and that's why I redug out my notes. That's one of the things, is I regularly take stock of how I feel, where I'm at, and pay more attention to myself. And then sometimes I have to revisit my notes, or revisit that Post-it note or those 5 questions or whatever it is. And by doing that, that's what made me think, actually, this is really helpful because this is something I go back to time and time again because it helps me. Maybe you will find something that helps you. It might be something completely different, but I really hope that you do. Just know that you're not alone. I am not a professional. I am just a person who I'm just a person who has anxiety, and I reached a point where I couldn't control it anymore. I couldn't live with it anymore, and I got some help. I have ups and down days, and it just so happens that I tend to have a hell of a lot more up days than I do down these days, and that is because I got help, and I really hope that you do too if you need it. It's really hard, and I appreciate that this is very difficult. So please take care of yourselves, be kind to yourself, and do what is best for you. So thank you for watching. Take care, please take care, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.